Emotional intelligence is very simple. It's in a situation or in a condition or in a culture or in an organization, whatever it is, you actually have a sense of how you feel about something. So intellectually you know something, but how do you feel about something? It's recognizing, it's the ability to recognize how you feel and then being able to manage those feelings. It's also being able to recognize how other people feel and then how to manage them in that situation. So an example would be you find out someone just gets some bad news about their review, or someone just gets a new task that's overwhelming for them, right? And you give them that task, and you have to think, how do I feel about that? Well, first of all, I'm feeling a little bad about giving him this feedback, and maybe, how do I feel about that? I'm not sure. Maybe I'm not being myself. Maybe I have to be more direct. Okay, now how am I going to manage that? I'm going to, be direct with them. I'm going to talk to them about it. And then how do they feel? Well, they're probably getting this feedback. Well, they might be feeling overwhelmed. They might be feeling concerned. They might not feel where to turn, what to do, and then managing that. Saying to them, how do you feel? What would you like to do? The point is that it's creating real dialogue around real human interaction that really gets people past what they need to get past and gets them to improve. If you walk around with a basic model of emotional intelligence, you can probably solve most problems in your work life, certainly most problems in your organization. So learn as much as you can about emotional intelligence and practice it.
Because emotional intelligence is something fundamentally different. It's the ability to identify and manage your emotions and those of others. And it's said to include 3 skills. First, emotional awareness. So empathy towards others, but also towards yourself. Second, the ability to harness emotions and apply them to tasks like problem solving. And third, the ability to manage emotions, which includes regulating your own emotions, but also calming down or cheering up other people. As you can clearly see by this contrast, very emotional people do not necessarily or automatically have a high emotional intelligence, because they may only display their emotions freely without thinking about or knowing why they have them, and maybe not even considering the appropriateness of showing them in the respective situation.
And I think where emotional intelligence can help us is to describe the skill of optimism. And optimism is not as soft as people think. It's not as Pollyanna-ish or as always look on the bright side of life. Optimists have had their own share of setbacks, but they've learned to bounce back. They've learned to develop a perception of the world and their experience that enables them to renew their energy and develop a mental toughness. As a contractor, we need to develop this ability to put positive spin on our world and make sure that we develop an attitude of gratitude and remember to celebrate the things which are good in our lives and the new opportunities that open up as one door closes.
And a fundamental part of being emotionally intelligent means knowing who you are. And for them to learn, we also need to learn it ourselves to be the role model that they need. Now you might be thinking, yeah, sure. But how do we approach this topic individually, but also as a society? And basically, it comes down to what everything comes down to. We need to learn a new skill. So when you learn a new skill, you first of all need to become aware of your incompetence in the field. So I got there with my burnout. I'm pretty sure that you can manage that more easily. And then you work on the skill until you manage it to the level that you want. And after a while, you will even be able to apply it without actively thinking about it. Take, for example, your driver's license. After a while, you stop thinking, oh, I need to put in the next gear. You just do so. Unconscious competence achieved. Now, the tricky thing, though, is to get from conscious incompetence to conscious competence. And we do that by learning the basics of how a car works and by practicing. So in the beginning, it's maybe difficult to steer the wheel at the same time as putting in the next gear, but after a while, it gets easier. And with emotional intelligence, it's basically the same thing. So I tried to compile my experiences and came up with a 6-step guide that hopefully helps people to get more emotionally intelligent. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to acknowledge our emotions. But not only as such, but as something valuable, because that's what they are. According to research by Antonio Damasio, people whose brain parts that are responsible for emotions have been damaged found themselves even having a harder time taking rational decisions. That's how valuable they are. And the very first small but simple thing that you can do is you can ask people with genuine interest how they are feeling. And when you're asked, answer with authenticity. When you feel good, but also when you feel bad. So no, I'm fine, but also no complaining. Instead of complaining about your colleagues, say, I don't feel appreciated at work, or whatever it comes down to. Make it an I message. And when people show emotions, tell them that it's okay to have those. Talk about them. Erase the taboo that I feel exists in our society of talking about emotions, because that's more often than not the one thing that keeps us from making the next step. And the next step is differentiating and analyzing emotions. So sometimes when we talk about or express a feeling, we substitute the original one with one that we think we know better or are better at handling. But there are actually a lot of different emotions, and all of them have their functions. And all of them might also need you to handle them differently. Therefore, it's important to get down to the core. And then you also need to accept and appreciate all those emotions. Because emotions are neither good nor bad. They just gain connotation through society. Take, for example, grieving or sadness. Why do we so desperately try to cut it out of our lives? Because actually, it's just a very beautiful illustration of the appreciation that we have for someone or something. Now, I approach all 3 steps by writing my emotions down in a journal just for that. On need basis, so not necessarily daily, but sometimes only every few weeks, or maybe even only every few months. Friends of mine do similar things with apps if you want to be more modern. And then there is the next step, reflecting on your emotions and their origin. Because sometimes just knowing why we feel the way you do already helps us handle the feeling. Again, for me, covered when I write them down, because it gives me time to actively think about them. And then you get to handling your emotions, because that's what it's all about, isn't it? And as said, reflecting might already suffice, but it might not. And you may still need to find your way on how to handle your emotions. Because there is more than one way to skin a cat, and I can only give you a few examples of what I did. And what helped me, if not handle the emotion, but at least find out how to handle it, was writing it down, because it put distance between me and my emotions. There has even been a study conducted on the positive effects of written expression of emotions by Pennebaker and Smith, and they published it in their book, Opening Up by Writing It Down, if you want to check it out. Because that's actually another thing that I do. I read on a topic. Currently, I'm reading Language of Emotions by Carla McLaren. Literally any book by Brené Brown is good to go, but there are so many more. And I talk to friends. I ask them, how do you approach this situation? How do you approach that topic or this emotion? And then it's more or less a trial and error principle. Sometimes it may be sports, sometimes it may be meditation. It's just important that you find your individual way. And then handling the emotions of others. And I'd say as soon as you mastered your emotions, but also in the process of getting better at it, you will find it easier and easier to also handle the emotions of others because you have a different understanding. And understanding and awareness are the keys. It gets even easier because you can simply ask the other person how you can support them, because they might know. Or you can also ask them how they can support themselves, because that way you not only help them in the acute situation, but you actually help them develop their emotional intelligence. And then, when we have a few people being emotionally intelligent, we also need to think about how can we teach our next generation.
There are certain things where your own judgment may work better than your logical mind thinks that it is. Let me give you an example. You are interviewing someone to be a new deputy director in your organization. They tick all the right boxes. They have performed well and correctly at every point. They are shining beautifully in every way. They have risen to the top of the list. But there is something which is holding you back. You cannot even explain it to yourself. You are even troubled, perhaps, to confess this to another colleague, because you cannot find a logical evidence for this thing. But actually you do. And then you share around the room that actually 2 or 3 other people have also, they're not quite sure what was wrong, but there's something that worries them. You decide not to employ. 2 years later, he is in prison. And it turns out that he was the biggest confidence trickster in the world. Now, I'm just saying, be careful. Sometimes there is a right brain and left brain. Your right brain can produce an answer and present it to your left brain. Your left brain cannot process it because it's logical and dismisses it. Be careful. Do listen to your right brain. Sometimes your right brain may turn out to be right. But do make sure, test it with your left brain as well. So I think this comes back to the Chinese proverb. We need to be both. We need to be as intelligent as we can be in every area. So we call it in the UK intuition. I don't know what that really means. It's almost an inner knowledge.
Let me add this from India.
Yeah.
In India, we say all decisions have to be made at 3 levels: at the level of the head, at the level of the heart, and at the level of the stomach. And it's only when all the 3 decisions line up that you make that decision.
Yeah.
So it's maybe useful to offer.
And I think that often comes into our ethical discussions as well, which was raised earlier. You know, where do we get our ethics from? Our personal ethics, I think sometimes they come from our stomach, actually. We've processed it with our head. It seems intellectually okay. And we are just about to do it because everybody else is doing it. Our heart is not completely happy, but our stomach is very uneasy. And just say, I can't quite feel comfortable with this. And that, I think, is really important.
Example how a bigger business uses this. Google, maybe you've heard of them, Google? All right, so Google is really good at capturing data, right, and analyzing data. They're pretty good at it. And they were really, really interested in what makes the best team. It was usually get the best people, makes the best team. But it wasn't really working. They couldn't figure it out. As soon as they would see one team doing well, another team would come up that's the exact opposite and do just as well. So they started Project Aristotle. And they took their 51,000 employees and they studied them and all this data. It wasn't because they ate lunch together. Was it because where they were from? Was it because their background, diversity, everything they looked at? And it came down to one thing: psychological safety. That's what made the most effective groups. If people felt safe and trustworthy inside of a group, they performed better. Well, what is that? It's high EQ. The group had a higher EQ, right? They can read body cues. They understand each other. They trust each other. They're patient, empathy, listening. That's all EQ. So when I read this, all this research, just like the movie scene, it was like this, it's EQ, this is it. So that's me in the smile challenge. This is something that you're going to be able to do the second you walk out of here. Smile challenge goes like this. You can start. I like to start off on a Monday. You have to make 5 people smile that you don't know. The rules are this. You make 5 people smile, different people. You can't say anything to them. You can't touch them. You can't dance for them. You just have to make them smile with your smile when they're not smiling. Make somebody smile with your smile when they're not smiling. Right? This is a great way to practice emotional intelligence. But some days you're going to try it, and it's going to look like that. All right? When you're feeling really good, smiling, making people smile is easy, but when your energy's low, it's hard. Or it could look like that. And that's scary. You might scare some people. It's okay, you got to keep trying. Everybody really quick, turn to anybody to your left or your right and just smile. Don't say a word, just smile. That's it, just smile. Okay, thank you. So the brain activity that just shot through your noggin was equivalent to eating 2,000 bars of chocolate. So you're welcome. You're welcome. No calories, no sugar, low. So, and that's been proven, 2,000 bars of chocolate. So going back to the smile challenge, why do this? All right, I want to break it down back to the emotional intelligence umbrella. When you're walking down the street, in the days you don't feel like smiling, that's starting to create self-awareness. And you'll start thinking about why I don't want to smile, how hard it is. Social awareness, kind of obvious. You're looking for people not smiling, you're connecting with them, you're looking at their cues, right? Oh, by the way, we call this smile bombing. Relationship building. It's the very beginning of building a relationship with someone. You never know when you're going to see them again, right? So you're looking for it. And then empathy. I feel my empathy growing when I do the smile challenge, when I smile at somebody and they don't smile back. I get to the point now where I think, what happened in their life that I couldn't make them smile? I don't think about me anymore. So it's starting to create empathy. So a smile challenge is just a really good way to get it started, to get you going with practicing EQ. I want to give you my favorite parable. The guy in the hole. Guy's walking down the street and he falls into a hole. The sides are so high he can't get out, so he has to wait for help. Well, soon, doctor walks up. Doc, can you help me out? Stuck in this hole. No problem. Know just what to do. Write a prescription, throw it down. He walks on. The guy's still stuck in the hole. So he waits. A priest walks by. Father, can you help me out? Yep, know just what to do. Prays, and he walks on. The guy's still stuck in the hole. So he waits, and a friend walks up. Shelly, can you help me out? I'm stuck in this hole. No problem. I know just what to do. She jumps in the hole. He's like, what are you doing? Now we're both stuck in this hole. Shelly looks at him and smiles and says, I've been down here before, and I know the way out. The connections we make with people will help us no matter what hole we stumble down.